There's a quote I come back to again and again, and it goes like this. You can have anything you want in life, but you can't have everything you want in life. The idea is that most of the things that we're desperately craving, the perfect body, the beautiful house, the big family, the seven-figure bank balance, whatever it is, most of those things, most of people's dreams are totally within their reach. And you can have any of those things, but you can't have all of those things. And so the question is, are you willing to pay the price that it would cost to have six-pack abs? Are you willing to sacrifice what's required to have a seven-figure bank balance? Are you willing to put aside your personal life to have that family of 8? You know, what is the price tag that you're willing to pay? It's a very difficult thing to determine, and it's especially a very difficult thing to predict. Sometimes we dive into things, we go after things in life that we really think are worth it, and we arrive there only to realize that, the sacrifices I made along the way might not have made it worth it. What did I sacrifice? I don't know, friends, family, relationship, free time, downtime, your health, or the opposite. On this week's show, we'll be talking about ethical, strategic downtime, time off, strategically planning ways to take a step aside from your working life and not to escape something you hate, but instead to move towards something that you value, which is creative, personal, alone time and offsite for yourself, time to really develop who you are outside of what you do, which is something that I'm terrible at, hence the show. If you're new here, it's the Lucas Rockwood Show. I'm your host. I'm a yoga teacher, a trainer, a serial entrepreneur. I'm a father of 3. But first and foremost, I'm a student. I like to learn things, so I go out into the world of health and wellness, personal growth and development, and I try to bring interesting new experts and authors and researchers to share their best thinking here with you and me, so hopefully we can all live more fulfilled lives. If you like the show, the best way to support me is just to scroll down and leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening to on your phone. You can also share the show on social media and tag me. It's at Lucas Rockwood. And lastly, if you'd like to get updates each week, go to yogabody.com/sign me up. There's a breathing worksheet you can grab there as well. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy. Hello and welcome everyone. Lucas Rockwood here. Welcome to the show. Today we'll be talking about time off, and I'm joined here with John Fitch. John is a business coach, an investor, a writer. He's got a new book out called Time Off, a practical guide to building your rest ethic and finding success without stress. You can learn about the book at timeoffbook.com, and John's personal website is john-fitch.com. John, welcome to the show.
It's an honor, Lucas. It really is. And it's cool I'm always just amazed by software, how you're having a moment in Spain and I'm having a moment right now in Texas, and we're jamming on the same thing. So hooray for technology and hooray for your creative work.
Thanks. You know, people are always talking about work ethic and grit and grind and hustle. And I don't know, the guy I always see is like Gary Vaynerchuk. I can't block him. You know, I try to block all of his videos, but every time I open any social media, some middle-aged guy, basically my age, in a beanie is screaming at me, telling me, you know, dropping F-bombs and telling me I need to hustle all the time. And I don't like to hear it because I hustle too much as it is. And so I know your guide is kind of the antithesis to all of this stuff. What was this born out of? Were you working too much? Were you in a startup, or how did you start to think about this concept of time off as a not just something to do as a holiday, but actually something to prioritize in life?
Well, I was definitely at one point the person drinking the Gary V Kool-Aid, and not only drinking it, I was chugging it, brother. And so, yeah, I guess dogmatically just assumed that was how you achieved success, just by working the hardest and putting in the most hours. But quantity of input has never equaled or guaranteed quality of output, but quality of input equals quality of output. And I had to have a really hard lesson where I was beyond burned out. And I had nothing. I was putting in all the hours in my software startup, but I was ruining the relationships with those around me. I was not getting perspective to help me make important decisions on how to pivot the company based on externalities. And my relationship of 4 years failed as well, all kind of in a week's time. So I had a lot of humbling things hit me at once, and that sort of uppercut woke me up, and it was a breaking point. And thankfully I had some mentors that reached out and asked me if I wanted to start a new company with them in New York. And I was heartbroken and definitely defeated from my startup feeling. So I took them up on that offer, and little did I know that would be a double blessing, because when we started the new company, they said, hey, we're going to prioritize rest. It's going to be the most important part of our company. I was only one of the three. So I was outvoted. And long story short, I got forced into it, and I was very dubious. But then all of a sudden I started producing the most quality work I was proud of. My relationships started to improve. I got more meaning out of life. In general, I say my saturation of life increased, and I had quality work, quality design, quality decision making. And it was a real life-changing, perspective-shifting transition for me. And when I was on my first sort of, I would call it like an actual time off, I was in Greece and met a lady who lives on an island where a lot of people live over the age of 100. And a couple of dinners with her and her friends really changed my perspective of time. And I started becoming obsessed on time off and rest. Started a podcast to make sure I wasn't the only person in the world that thought this was powerful. Turns out a lot of people thought it was powerful. And before I knew it, a couple of listeners were like, hey, please make this a book. And that was about 2 years ago, and teamed up with my co-author, Max, and gave our stab at putting a book together. And I'm bringing this back full circle for you, brother. I wrote the book for that former version of myself that needed data, needed anecdotes, needed, a classic sort of business book framework to show the value of time off, because I still have that type A achiever mindset, but I realized that there was a way to work smarter, whereas previously I only believed in working harder.
Paint a more clear picture when you're burnt out, just so people can connect or not with your story. Like everybody's burnout story looks different. For some people it's like, the mom juggling new kid and then career. For some people it's like sleeping under their desk writing code. Like what was your story like?
Yeah, so I would summarize it with, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and the word can mean a lot to different people, but if you had a gas tank, right, like in a car, your meter of your gas tank, imagine that same design concept, but rather than gasoline or electricity, it's enthusiasm. So to me, when you've reached burnout, you don't have much enthusiasm left. That's one thing to pay attention to. It starts becoming beyond running on a treadmill. You're just trying not to fall off of it. Like the speed of it's gone up too much. You no longer enjoy the leisurely jog on the treadmill. You're just trying to not bust your ass. And so then that means you have some obsessive personalities, like, oh, I get to inbox 0. Oh, it's 10 o'clock and, oh, dang, do I need to go do that thing? You're not able to feel comfortable pausing. And if you don't feel comfortable pausing and feel comfortable having a moment of calm to yourself, even if it's 15 minutes, then that's what I would consider overwork, overwhelm, burnout. But all in all, I would say if you've lost an enthusiasm for the work, for your view on life, for your own inner landscape, then it's probably time to assess your relationship to work and leisure.
I really struggle with trying to figure out, I really resonate with your message. I need time off. It's been quite a while, but I really struggled to try to figure out what fits into different blocks of life. I had tons and tons of free time. My daughter just turned 15, and I really remember being 15. I don't kind of remember it. I really remember it. Like I remember what I thought about and what I did and stuff like that. So it's an interesting thing. My other kids are so much younger. I'm like, I don't remember that. That was just kid stuff. But when I was 15, I had big boy stuff going on. I spent time in the Sierras, and I traveled, and I did drugs, and I did things. I had a life. I had a 3-dimensional life, and I also just had like tons of time. And so when I get upset with my daughter, that's what I get upset about. Is I just remind her that there will be a day when you don't have these big swathing blocks of free time. and I don't know what you should do with it, but I know you should use it. That's what I always tell her. I don't know what you should do, but like try something. Just try something because try something. And the reason I say that is because I had the luxury of time then. In fact, I had luxury of time pretty much up until I was about 26. I really prioritized really myself, and for better or for worse, I prioritized myself and my travels and traveling around the world and these kinds of things. And then really quickly, I stopped finding meaning in that. Similar to you, I had a very important relationship fall apart. I started a business which was successful and didn't light me up at all. And then suddenly I found a ton of meaning in just like basically putting on the biggest, I used to go backpacking with my friends when I was a teenager, and I was the guy who carried the heaviest bag, and I started doing that after about the age of 27, just carrying a massive bag to the point where, I don't know, at my peak I had 36 staff and business all over, and 3 kids in 2 countries, and I guess where I'm going with this is I really have a hard time thinking about things aside from the phase of life that I'm in right now. Because there's lots of things I'd like to do, but I got a 1-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 15-year-old. I'm 42. There's all kinds of limitations, So a couple of things I'd like to do. I'd like to float the Mississippi from Canada on down. I would like to summit some significant peak. I have a couple of sort of like big things like that. And then I just have some silly things like I like to take the train from London to Moscow, and just kind of things like this. And just some of this stuff I can't really do without being a negligent father right now. I need like maybe 3 or 4 years before I can pull off some of these things. And so I guess I'm just trying to put your message works. It works differently in different stages of life. For a guy like me, time off looks very different at age 42 with 3 kids and businesses and this kind of thing than it did when I was 26 and would literally go into a hut on an island in Thailand and just like hang out for 2 weeks. It's not available to me anymore. And it's not even a craving, And so how do you help people think about this in terms of generational stuff? Because time off for somebody who's 63, 2 years away from retirement, that's different than somebody who's 23 and just coming out of law school or whatever, and so less in terms of the specifics. How do you think about this more in terms of just like first principles?
There's so much you have to edit out of a book and curate so that it's readable versus try to document every nuance in specific. And so the way I think about it is, and it's talked about in the subtitle of the book, find your rest ethic. Key word is find. Like that doesn't mean that it's found and then found forever. It's a moving target. And I like that you said that there's different seasons in life, and I totally agree with that. And so think about it as you have a work ethic, and there's lots of books out there for it. I could give you a long list of recommendations. You probably have one that's even longer than mine. And just through your seasons in life, you've had to upgrade and redesign and renovate your own work ethic, right? Based on your position, what's your role, what's your business, what industry is it in? Like you're always having to change the way you work. And so you should also be changing the way you rest. And that's the point of us trying to combine those 2 words, rest ethic. To me, when you have the ethic attached to it, it's highly intentional. It's highly protected. It's constantly being modified and optimized and improved. And so that's the main message, is that we wanted to, in the book, expand the connotation of time off, because I think previous to the book, people just defaulted to vacation. It is these like pretty serious forms of time off where you got to travel somewhere and do this thing that is a big time commitment. Whereas no, time off can be these short little windows where you're just stepping away from the actual doing, stepping away from the actual grind. It's detaching yourself, and to help people think about the benefits of it, regardless of your stage in life. We have a chapter in the book that I'm a huge fan of called The Creative Process in Time Off. And the creative process can be summarized into 4 phases. First is preparation. Think about like you're in planning phase. You're looking at the problem. You're kind of teeing up your sandbox of the world you're going to play in and make something for. Then you have incubation, then you have illumination, and then the fourth step is verification. Those two middle ones I mentioned, incubation and illumination, literally, my brother, only occur when you're not actually actively working on the thing. Your subconscious and other amazing parts of our mind that we've yet to fully understand, by stepping away from the actual task, your brain is working on it, even though you may be doing something that's a hobby, you're playing with your kids, you're going on a jog, you're going to a yoga class, you're just going on a walk and catching up with a friend, or if you're lucky enough in that chapter in life, you're on a sabbatical for a month or two. Whatever the case is, by stepping away, you're activating two crucial components of the creative process. And so why we're all about people designing their rest ethic and taking it serious is that allows you to activate those two crucial components of the phases of creativity, right? You hear the classic like light bulb moment while you're in the shower or doing something that was totally non-work related. That's the point. And that's what, our whole point of view is. Just as serious as you take your work ethic, so should you with your rest ethic. And the book has many deep dives into this attempt of expanding the connotation of time off. For example, we have a deep dive on play, solitude, reflection, travel, and some of these other more common terms are, of course, in there as well. But you need a recipe for yourself, given, to your point, your unique part of life that you're in. And so I hope that, the book allows people to go, what is my menu, my recipe at this stage in life that gives me the benefits of time off, regardless of its form. But if you currently are trying to achieve things only by actively doing the thing, we're just trying to say you should step away occasionally because it's going to help you rebuild up that enthusiasm tank, just because we need rest, period. But also see it as an investment in better ideas and better strategy. Don't feel bad about it. You got to get rid of that guilt, because in a way, and trust me, my type A really benefits from this type A personality. Every time I take my forms of time off, I don't feel guilty anymore, because I go, oh, this is actually going to allow me to incubate on this current business design problem or whatever's in front of me work-wise. And I'll be gifted with an illumination moment, and my work will get smarter rather than me just trying to hit my head against the wall and make something happen.
I know, like, people always teach, like, you should separate work and life. It's just been impossible for me for the past 13 years or something. And so I just stopped even trying. And I don't know, like, I just think of everything as work. And I guess it's easier because I work for myself, so I can only blame myself, where I think a lot of people work for someone else, and so they feel like they're giving someone else their time. But I guess I think of all those things, some random social thing, reading a silly book, hanging out on TikTok, asking my daughter how to use Snapchat. I just think of all of those things as like work. And I think of work as enjoyable too. It all got put into context recently. The COVID thing hit us pretty hard here. And so we spent, we're still pretty much on lockdown. It was 3 months on lockdown, 2 weeks I had not even leaving a house at one point. And it starts to make you really think, like, what do you really want? And it's not that many things. It's not that many things. And it wasn't to go spend time on an island. And I think because I've done that a bunch, I lived on an island for a while. I think I wanted to work, but I really wanted to work, and I did work, and I really just wanted my work to be better, and I wanted to be smarter, and I definitely wanted to spend time with the most important people in my life on a deeper level, and make sure that I'd done that. But it was an interesting moment, because I guess I have all these ideas about things I want to do, whether it's sailing or travel or whatever it is. And then, really the world gets turned upside down. You go, what do I really want? To be like, well, I'd like to be really intellectually stimulated, throw my kids around for a little while, do a barbecue, and then do some meaningful work for 3 or 4 hours, go to bed. Do some yoga and go to bed. And it's really put things into context. But here's the deal. Most of the people listening right now, I think statistically, at least I know my listeners pretty well, I think about 80% of them hate their job, and probably about 10% are neutral, and probably 10% love their work like I do. I'm really quite fortunate. I really enjoy it. I love Mondays. I love tonight I'll probably work until 1 a.m, and I'm really quite pleased about it. I'm the last one here at the office. In fact, nobody's been coming into the office, and it really lights me up just as much as family and everything else. But for those people, those 80% who don't like their work, I guess where I'm going with this is this time off idea really gets seductive. And during my short stint in corporate America, what I found is people were obsessing over the next trip, the next holiday, the next 3-day weekend. And I also lived on a tourist island for many years, and I saw the sort of 50 plus, 65 plus fallout of this, where people have been dreaming. I lived in Thailand, and many people from Northern Europe, from UK, from Germany, they've been dreaming about hot weather and cold beer for like 30 years, and then they'd get there and it just seemed kind of sad. I was like, it was here all the time. And it's like, it's like $750 a month and you can pull off this lifestyle. There's not, it wasn't like this elusive dream. And it just seemed like such a small target. So for people listening, where I'm going with this big convoluted ramble is, for people listening, we have 80% of them don't like their job at all. And my fear is that they're going to latch onto this as yet another form of escapism, and they'll tag it on. So here's what I learned from my time living in Thailand, where I met a lot of expats, is people started to think that travel was people started to think that travel was like a character, or like a, how would I describe this? Like a thing. Like let's say you're an academic, or you're a musician, or you're a marathon runner, or you're a tourist. And I was like, tourism, that's not really a thing. That's not really a thing. I mean, getting drunk and watching European football matches in bars in various countries, that's not like a thing. And that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that the people listening, the 80% who dislike their jobs, are going to latch onto this idea of trying to optimize their life around escaping, rather than trying to optimize their life around true meaning and connection. I know the purpose of your job, your book and your work is not to teach people how to escape from a life they dislike. But the reality is that's what people are dealing with. That's what they're struggling with. A job and a life that's pretty frustrating, and most of their time off period is a respite from that.
Yes, the book is definitely, and it could be taken that way of, these are some routes of escapism, whereas, I mean, if I was to prioritize who gets the book, the book's doing very well right now. That I'm very stoked about that. Who I hope has gotten it more than others is leaders, those that actually control and influence the culture of a team, of a company. That'd be the primary target, because hopefully they read it and they realize, oh wow, giving more space and freedom for my people will make them more interesting. Therefore, we win. And then people don't have to feel so trapped, right? So that would knock out a lot of different problems at once. A secondary audience would be someone who does hate their job, or maybe not the job, maybe it's the boss and the rules that they have to work in, whatever the case may be. Well, now maybe they have some upgraded taxonomy and some anecdotes and some data points that they can bring forth to their leader, their manager, and say, hey, I don't really think we do a good job of respecting personal space and leisure in this company, and I think it's important. Oh, and it's not only I think it's important, it is important, and here's some data points on why, or maybe, hey, read this book and let's talk about it. And so, I can't, if you just don't have passion for your job, like, I don't know if more time off is going to help you with that or not. I think there's some time off practices that are very practical, even if you're in a totally highly controlled environment. And the chapter in there is reflection, for example. And I think a lot of times the reason, think about it, people escape, well, sometimes because of an external environment, but I have a strongly held contrarian belief that a lot of people go down paths of escapism because they haven't gone within. They haven't done the reflection work inside to actually identify what is important to me. What do I want more of? What do I want less of? What am I willing to put up with? What do I want my legacy to be? Do I want a legacy? And these are big questions that you have to go inward and find out. And that is a time off practice of pressing pause and scanning your internal landscape, because every time I've done it, something changes. Like, I end up making decisions differently, prioritizing more clearly, and, speaking my truth, leaving a job, firing a client, whatever it is. And yeah, if you're caught in a hamster wheel, there's if you're in that like hamster wheel mindset, probably just like a hamster, you want to get the hell out of there. You want to escape. And that's just a repeating problem. And so I hope that some of the ideas can help people, maybe change their culture to feel less trapped so that they can fall back in love with the work. Because sometimes they just do need more frequent breaks away. You know, I have an audience as well, and I think my pie chart would look something similar to yours. And those that I've been able to transfer from, I hate my job, I want things to change, I'm definitely on a escapism path, or I have some behaviors showing that. How I've been able to help them, and I hope that we wove enough of this in the book, is that, hey, you have to do your own definitions of what is meaningful, and you have to define your own version of success. You can't let society do it for you, because if you do, then we're all supposed to still be cogs in a wheel and working in the industrial age with only a few people benefiting. But no, it's 2020. We mostly live in a knowledge economy, and I think very soon more and more of a creative economy. And creatives need to they got to have their inner work dialed in, right? So they can share their gift instead of letting someone tell them what to share. So, in your found leisure time, in your found time off, I hope that there is a moment or moments of reflection so that you can be more clear on what you need. I'm sure you've heard of the book Essentialism, which is a world famous book. And there's a concept in there that I love so much that I've benefited from, and it can take on many shapes and sizes. And it's called the personal offsite. We hear offsites all the time in business, right? Oh, our team's going to have an offsite. Well, what about one just for you, where it's not about getting away and getting drunk on Mai Tais on a beach, or, going to a big show to just forget about things. Instead, it's, I'm going to pull some Henry Thoreau solitude and really try to understand what I want in life, because I think once you define that, you can say no more gracefully. You can find your joy of missing out versus your fear of missing out, and you can feel less trapped. And then maybe ultimately you quit that job because you're not as scared anymore because you've done that inner confidence work. That's my thoughts on it. And by no means can I change everyone's situations, but hopefully I've given them some very powerful proof that rest and time off is important. And I hope that it gets instilled in more working cultures, because it ultimately helps them be more interesting and creative.
I spent 13 years going back and forth between Southeast Asia and here, and I did see a shift in what I would call sort of productive leisure, or ethical rest, as you might call it. And meaning I would go, I mainly spent time in the Gulf of Thailand, and as the years went on, I found more and more people there to really replenish and rejuvenate and to think about things and to have meaningful conversations, and less drunk people watching, European football matches. And of course there's still plenty, there's still plenty of that. But I guess what happened is, like, when I reel back the clock and I look at, this is why I have these conversations with my daughter. When I reel back the clock and I look at, like, a lot of my teenage years, like, I don't appreciate 90% of that time I spent screwing off, drunk, fumbling around, like these kinds of things. I really don't value it. Maybe once or twice, but most of it's just a big blur. And mostly I just think, like, oh, wow, it would have been great to, it's not so much regret. It's just, if I could have a redo, and I think if most of us could have a redo, I don't think they'd be spending their time in the Gulf of Thailand being drunk watching, Manchester United. I don't think that's what they'd be doing. I think you'd learn to scuba dive, or I think you would have a good conversation, or this idea of ethical leisure, rest ethic, I like a lot. I like the idea of meaningful, purposeful travel and meaningful, purposeful downtime, and just making the most of whatever time we have available, not hating your job and then using your holidays as some escape from something you're trying to run away from.
Yeah, well said. And I'll finish on, we by no means did we invent it. We just simply spotlighted it or curated it again. And Aristotle had this beautiful concept called noble leisure. And at the end of the book, Max and I, my co-author and I, have worked a lot in artificial intelligence, and just seeing what that's having on vocational skills versus what's left of human skills. And we're not scared by it. We actually think it's going to hook humanity up by taking the mundane things away that humans are terrible at because we're messy, leaving room for us to be more messy and creative. And so a return to what Aristotle called noble leisure, where the things we do in our leisurely activity, minus the just get drunk and escape. But when I think about what people do in their extracurricular, their volunteer, their hobby time, their family time, as Aristotle said, and we're just resurfacing it, that is deeply noble activities of humanity. It's where we preserve our human dignity. It's where we push humanity forward. And rather than it being these like little slivers of found time where we do that, I hope for a future where that's how we spend the majority of our time. Now that we're automating more and more of the machine-like tasks that I think keep humans quite miserable because we're not machines. And so I like your point of view on it, and I hope that people take their rest ethic seriously because it's practice into hopefully what all of us will be doing in the future, which is just more and more noble, leisurely activities to push humanity forward, because we sure do need some big ideas and new ways of being.
Yeah, I'm super looking forward to this AI thing. You know, I was a kid in the '80s, and we had Robbie the robot, and Robbie the robot was supposed to clean the house. Robbie the robot did nothing; he was useless, and we still I'm at home and I'm talking to Alexa. I'm like, Alexa, play the news. What song would you like to hear? I was like, oh my, this is like people are worried about the robots taking over the world. I was like, we are so far, from the robots taking over the world. Like, we don't even have like solid voice recognition yet.
Yeah, and we can look at, Max and I, my co-author and I, Max has spent way more time in the industry. I mean, he's a thought expert in a specific field of AI called deep learning, and AI, where AI meets creativity. And in the book, we talk about, hey, if you just change the narrative in your head, it's really powerful. Most of everyone listening right now has already lived out what I'm about to say. And if you change the narrative from, oh, robots are taking our jobs, robots are taking over, which I agree with you, it's not even reasonable. But if you change that to, hey, AI is like a new type of paintbrush, that is not only technically true, but I think it's very accurate, because if you've typed in Google search, if you've used the recommendation engine on Netflix or Spotify, you are interacting with AI. You're using it as a paintbrush to help you curate, make faster decisions, create more. And I think that pattern is going to increase, which will then open up more of the meaningful activity in life. And if it's not apparent, the book Time Off, there's not, to my knowledge, anything in the book that is about being lazy. It is not a manifesto for being lazy. If someone wants to be lazy, cool. But it's more about the parts of our existence and the human experience where, and that's an intuitive feeling of where is the most deep human connection and meaning and joy and wonder, because those spaces, we all know they just give us a profound connection to life and each other. And I think all of those things we traditionally would consider time off. But I hope that over time, when people look back at our book decades from now, they'll say like, oh, you should have called it Time On, because those things you're talking about in the book is all we do now. And I hope that kind of culture shift is possible. And technically speaking, I think we're headed in that direction.
It's great, John. I appreciate you coming on the show. Congratulations about your book success. I hope it keeps going well. For people who want to check out your book and follow you online, where should we send them?
Yeah, so timeoffbook.com is all things the book, and John Fitch is my name. I think Instagram maybe is a good spot to find me. I'm kind of a visual person, so I put up cool quotes, read parts of the book. I share snippets from awesome podcast interviews like this. And that's just at John Fitch on Instagram.
John, thanks so much, and let's keep in touch. Chronic lower back pain is estimated to affect as much as 80% of the population at some point in your life. It might happen when you're 25 and snowboarding. It might happen when you're 75 and just retiring from a career. But when back pain strikes, it can be really debilitating. There's lots of different things you can and should do to work on your spine strength and flexibility and balance. The fourth element that doesn't get talked about enough is traction. And traction is the practice of creating literally more space between your vertebrae. You can do this by lying flat, not so practical. You can do this by hanging upside down, like on old school inversion tables or gravity boots. And we've been doing it recently, well, for the past 10, 11 years, using the yoga trapeze. You hang from your hips and you hang upside down. And it's been so successful, so popular, that we have yoga trapeze teachers now in 38 or 39 different countries. We have yoga trapeze students in even more countries, 43 countries or something like that. And we are training teachers actively to work with students all around the world. You can teach private one-on-one, you can teach in gyms and fitness centers. A lot of our trainers now work virtually. They work via Zoom to help clients specifically with their spine. This course is 12 days long. It's live, it's interactive, it's a lot of fun. We walk you through the safety, the setup, the anatomy, the physiology, and all of the business concerns you need as well to get started teaching professionally right away. Whether you're a yoga teacher now or if you're new to teaching, the program will take you all the way from zero all the way to getting your very first client. To learn more about the program, go to yogatrapezeonline.com, yogatrapezeonline.com, and I hope you can join us. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a listener question from Senna on Instagram. And Senna says, Lucas, I've heard about this raw until 5 or fruit until noon diet on YouTube. What do you think about this approach for weight loss and just overall health? I know that fruit is high in fiber and high in vitamins. There's a lot of these approaches out there, and there's many people who follow these things. There was a famous book called Fit for Life that inspired a lot of people to, eat a lot of fruit. And for some reason, people took that book and came up with these ideas of just eating fruit until noon or just eating fruit until 5 p.m. The first thing that's really important is to ask, what is fruit? And is a blueberry the same as an apple? Is that the same as a watermelon? And what about a cucumber? That's a fruit too, technically. And so it's really important that we define these things. In pop health, we just tend to throw weird things at the wall, like, start off your day with a green smoothie, make sure that you have a collagen shake, you should be having bone broth, it'll be a miracle. We had somebody on the show who did bone broth miracle, and my question was, what's the miracle? It's like, it's mineral dense, that's cool, but like, I don't see a miracle happening. With fruit until noon or fruit until 5, my only challenge is usually what people are talking about are sweet fruits. So apples, oranges, grapes, watermelon. The most common pears, the most common fruits in the supermarket are also the highest in fructose. And fructose is a funny type of sugar in that it gets metabolized in your liver. It's extremely lipogenic. That means it turns into body fat very easily, probably a genetic adaptation so that we could store fat really easily when we found a fruit tree or something like this. And it's terrible at satiety. So when you're eating fruit until noon or fruit until 5, you're never full. I don't know if you've ever gone on an all-fruit diet, but I have. You're never full. I used to eat like 8 mangoes in Thailand in one sitting. I was just starving. It doesn't go away. It doesn't make you satiated. It just doesn't work. And unfortunately, that fructose turns into visceral belly fat really, really easily because it's metabolized in the liver. And so for those two reasons, I don't really like the approach. I would much rather see you do fat until 5, like where all you do is eat heavy fat foods until 5 p.m. I think that's going to have much better metabolic impact than sugary fruit until 5. Generally speaking, with the common fruits, the pop fruits, so apples, oranges, pears, watermelon, the stuff that's really high in fructose, you have to be careful with it because it has so much fructose, unnatural amounts of fructose, that it's very easy to overdo it with fructose. And there's a surprising number of people who are fructose intolerant. I mean, they have so much that it leads to metabolic problems where you get fatty liver and deposits around their midsection and things like this. And people say, Lucas, that's impossible. Nobody ever got fat from fruit. Well, I know a lot of fruitarians, and I have known a lot of fruitarians, and you're right, most of them are not what you would look at and call obese, but many of them had bellies and they had visceral fat around their midsection, and many of them were suffering from blood sugar dysregulation. It's not a great way to go. These ideas that people come up with are really based on ideology. People say, we're like monkeys, we should eat fruit all day. That's not true. It's just not true. And the fruit we have today is not like the fruit we had 50 years ago or 100 years ago. I wish things were that simple. I wish it was eat fruit and live forever. I wish it was, eat carbohydrates, get energy, eat protein, build muscle, eat fat, get fat. And so then all we need to do is, eat carbs and protein. But Our body's so much more complicated than that. Our food system is more complicated than that. A pink lady apple is more similar to a candy bar than it is to a cucumber, for example. And it's just important that we look at things from a systems approach, not from an ideological perspective. Usually when people get into these fruit until noon or fruit until 5, usually weight loss is somewhere on the agenda. Very often health optimization, skin conditions, things like this are somewhere on the agenda. And in almost all cases, you can get better results by focusing on something else. If you were doing all green vegetables until noon or fat until 5, I could get behind that much more than I could get behind binge eating fruit. If you go on YouTube, you'll find all these youngish people, usually they're in their 20s and their 30s, and they're eating 30 bananas a day, or they'll have pictures and there's just mangoes and fruit all around them. You can certainly get away with that, and there's certain things about that which will make you'll have kind of a honeymoon period. Lots of fiber and lots of minerals and lots of enzymes, and you'll feel pretty well. But nobody does well on that long term, and I can say that if I know anything, I know that. And so the fact that a 28-year-old YouTuber is eating mangoes and bananas for a few weeks and riding his bike around, that's not very instructive for most of us. Hope that's helpful. Try fat until 5. Talk to you soon. We have a listener question from Charlie on Instagram. Charlie says, Lucas, what do you think of all these people wearing COVID masks? Homemade masks, surgical mask, N95 mask. Which is the best? Are they all bad? I'm guessing they're all decreasing our oxygen. Isn't that bad for yoga breathing? My answer might surprise you. I'm a huge fan of masks, both from a hygiene perspective, but even more from a breathing perspective. Myself and my family, we masked up really early. I continue to wear a mask right now. I don't care. I'm super happy to wear a mask. I don't particularly want to breathe in the air of the breath of my barber or the flight attendant. I'm super happy to wear a mask. I'm not sure why people are so bent out of shape. It's wonderful. I wish people wore masks in the grocery store for the rest of my life. That would be great. Not in the park, but indoor spaces, totally fine. From a breathing perspective, I've had a lot of questions. That's why I wanted to answer this one directly. Charlie, I'm excited about it because what is it doing? Well, it's forcing you to recycle CO2. Most people overbreathe. I'll say that again. Most people overbreathe. They're always breathing a little too much because they tend to be stressed out, breathing high up into their chest, and at a rate of breathing that's too fast. What would I define as too fast? 12, 15, 20 breaths per minute. You're breathing at a rate that's accelerated despite the fact that you're just hanging out, listening to some weird guy's podcast, right? And so I like these masks because they force you to recycle your CO2. CO2 is bronchodilating, it's vasodilating, actually helps your body absorb the oxygen that's already in your blood. So it's been a really good thing. The interesting thing is you get used to it too. I have a fourth floor walk up. I guess there's an elevator, but I rarely take it. And when I started walking up with the mask, I was like, whoa, I get pretty dizzy. And within just literally a couple of days, you get totally used to it. My kids as well, wearing masks, doing the same thing. In terms of what type of mask, I like the surgical ones best. The homemade ones, they don't really breathe very well. So they block particulate, but the air doesn't really flow through them. So I'm a big fan. I don't like the N95 so much. I don't find them comfortable. I like the typical surgical mask. I've read all the research. It seems like the surgical masks are pretty decent. They're not quite at an N95 level, but pretty close. So that's the one. I hope people keep wearing them. I'm a fan. Thanks for listening to The Lucas Rockwood Show. If you enjoy the podcast, I have 2 asks of you. Number 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag me. My handle is @LucasRockwood. Number 2 is please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my mailing list, every week I send out information about the podcast, behind the scenes stuff, announcements of online classes and special events. I email about once a week. You can do that at yogabody.com/sign me up. And right now we have a free breathing worksheet on that page as well. It's yogabody.com/sign me up. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.